Hello friends, I'm Bigstupidgrin. It sure has been a long while since I've done one of these. I had an existential crisis with State of the Investigator, in addition to a budding sense of burnout on the game as a whole. I like assigning pseudo-objective grades and tiers to things as much as the next person, but with the card pool as it is, most investigators have plenty of tools to overcome weaknesses and be at least decent at everything. I'm reimagining these videos to become more like reviews and guides than rankings. They're to help you decide if you want to try the Investigator. While I talk about power level throughout, I'm also going to cover playstyle and how fun they are to play in multiple player counts. Finally, I'll throw in deck lists. In Monterey Jack, we're looking at a very similar investigator to my previous subject in Trish Scarborough, the archetype of high intellect, high evade investigators. Some of these are risk-reward glass cannon types, and some aren't. I'm just showing the ones with at least 4s in both intellect and agility. Arguably more investigators fit this type. Comparing the 3 rogues, Trisha has the most unique playstyle, adding crazy value to cards and situations with her ability, and is probably the easiest of the bunch to break in a thematic way. Finn is the closest to a triple stat threat with fighting, has a potentially high frequency of free actions, and has a developing side plot of illicit cards, but also has the worst overall card pool. So what's Monty's niche in all this? Let's find out. Monterey Jack has... wrong Jack. Monterey Jack has 8 health, 6 sanity, 1 willpower, 4 investigate, 2 fight, and 5 agility. 5 agility is absolutely absurd. You can evade almost all the non-spherical enemies of the game on normal difficulty, and it's not hard to supplement it. This makes for less urgent mulligans, unlike with a traditional clue gatherer who finds trouble with enemies. Jack's ability is Reaction at the end of your turn. If you started this round 1 location away from your current location, either gain 1 resource or draw 1 card. If you started the round 2 or more locations away, do both instead. This feels like a cross between Jenny Barnes and Ursula Downs from a thematic standpoint. This ability is more flexible than Barnes's, but is more map dependent too. It slightly favors lower player counts as you are clearing locations more quickly, but if you're stuck playing the dodge tank or spot fighter, you may be moving less than you'd think. His Elder Sign is +1. If you started this round 1 or more locations away from your current location, gain a resource or draw 1 card. It might be slightly above average in that many of Elder Signs are mostly irrelevant, being skill boosters without bonuses. +1 isn't going to make the difference with many tests, but could theoretically help the rogue succeed by cards once in a blue moon. The nice thing about the bonus is that it's not dependent on a successful test. Full disclosure though, I don't remember if I've actually gotten the bonus yet. I underestimated Trusty Bullwhip when I first saw it. It is a 2-cost asset with 2 agility icons and 1 wild icon. Item, weapon, melee, takes up 1 hand slot, fast, Monterey Jack deck only. Action Fight. This attack uses agility instead of fight. If this attack succeeds, you may exhaust Trusty Bullwhip to either automatically evade the attacked enemy or deal +1 damage for this attack. It's fast, cheap, and only takes 1 hand slot. It counters those low fight, high evade enemies that would otherwise cause grief to this player archetype, especially if they have alert. If you hit 3 times, you could deal 4 damage with it in a turn, and even if you can't kill the enemy, you can automatically evade it. You can even hit an enemy engaged with a teammate and automatically evade for them. Against elites and tougher enemies, you could combine this with a backstab or a similarly high power event. Its damage potential is on the smallish side, so in larger player counts don't expect to handle bosses with scaling help on your own. However, I must point out that you can evade elite enemies with this. Similar cards often say non-elite, so this is a huge deal in Bullwhip's favor. Buried Secrets is... Revelation, put buried secrets into play in your threat area. If your location can be investigated, you cannot move except by scenario card events. Action, investigate. If you succeed, instead of discovering clues, discard buried secrets. If you fail, you may take 2 horror to shuffle it into your deck. Side note, how many locations can't be investigated? Anyways, in my experience, this weakness isn't too bad. I hate to say the same thing over and over again with weaknesses, but the impact of most depend on the situation. Worst case, realistically, you fail a couple times and take 4 horror. Blazing through your deck with card draw could make this worse, but I wouldn't adjust your playstyle or deck building for it. This means Buried Secrets gets more dangerous later in campaigns and at higher difficulties, unless you scale up your stats to compensate. You can't use cards that have their own investigate action to get rid of this, so no lockpicking. As with all Edge of the Earth protagonists, I can't keep saying the word investigator, he has a card pool that transforms him into a different class. In this case, it's level 0 Rogue, up to 5 Seeker level 0 cards, all neutrals, and all levels 1 through 5 Seeker cards. My first impression after playing him is that he's actually missing quite a few good cards. Lockpicks level 1, Adaptable, Haste, and the new counter Espionage come to mind. With only 5 level 0 Seeker cards, he has to be deliberate with his choices there. I generally use them to deal with my low willpower, but we'll cover that later. He makes up for this with access to all high-end Seeker cards. I don't have much experience with those, but there are enough solid and straightforward additions to purchase if you don't want to get fancy, especially Monty's own set. For newer players, whether to take resources or cards with Jack's ability may get some getting used to. For example, many newer players fear drawing because of weaknesses, so they may take unnecessary resources. You could take advantage of that through deck building. This provides its own nuance, however. Resource sinks and expensive cards are good for him, but too many coupled with a lack of resource generation cards will hamstring a deck. Ultimately, in-game experience is the best teacher, but you can search Arkham DB for deck lists and learn from more experienced players. In a way, 2-fight is good for beginners, because they won't be tempted to run weapons like a 3-fight rogue might. Evasion may be counterintuitive at times, but unless Jack draws an answer like Bullwhip or Backlash, that's his enemy management. I'm trying to get away from numerical ratings or letter grades, but I want to do it for difficulty to play. If a 5 means the hardest investigators to play and build for, and a 0 is somebody you'd give to a brand new player, I'm putting Jack at a 3. His in-game difficulty curve isn't high, but his deck building may intimidate. At least with the Edge of the Earth Investigator set, many player cards work well with the Investigator that can use them, so that's a good place to start if you're stumped. The challenges presented by Arkham Horror card game vary dramatically based on player count. I'll try to be as succinct as I can. If you're listening to the video only, you may want to look at the screen now for some more info. In solo, or true solo, or one-handed solo, you want to skip tests when you can, have the ability to deal with all emergency situations, all while grabbing a few clues and doing some damage. Free movement really helps too. In 2-player, you can specialize more, but the ability to deal with enemies and clues at the same time really helps. Fighters can run into a situation where they're waiting for enemies to show up, so the ability to investigate on the side is important. In 4-player games, clues and damage scale up so much that while trick cards like Working a Hunch are still great, they lose some of their value. When you suddenly need 16 clues or damage, the game becomes a marathon of passing tests. I'm sorry, but I've never played 3-player before. I'd imagine it's somewhere in between 2 and 4-player, which is admittedly a lazy conclusion. In solo, Jack is a glass cannon with his willpower, but rogues are known to be great solo investigators. Higher education should take care of this for the most part. Just stay ahead on resources and keep 5 cards in your hand. This doesn't help in campaigns until you get experience, but hopefully early scenarios will be forgiving while Monty rushes the map for VP locations. Monty really shines in 2 and perhaps 3-player games. He can evade, attack some with Bullwhip and event cards, and grab clues with the best of them. The ideal partner for him is a high willpower damage dealer with some clue gathering ability. With Faustian Bargain, Jack can even help those kinds of investigators with turn 1 resources, so while rogues are generally the lawful evil class, the relationship is supportive in both directions. Monterey Jack's main weakness in 4-player is that his damage doesn't do well with scaled up enemy count and boss health. To be fair, with the Bullwhip he can evade whatever baddie the rest of the team is ganging up on, and many bosses bring the pain if they are ready in the enemy phase. He should be just fine as a cleaver who can evade for himself, and if you have a surplus of investigating talent, he can occupy enemies by repeatedly evading them in a pinch. I didn't mention his willpower in the learning curve section because it's more of something that affects how much fun you have with Jack. He isn't a mystic after all. Some scenarios and campaigns will be harder than others with him. To be fair, you can rush to higher education, so he has an easier time than Finn Edwards or Winifred. He has access to low-cost redshirt allies in the Seeker class, which is nice. Of course, he can also pass the buck with You Handle This One. Horror damage is less important than cards like Frozen in Fear that stop you in your tracks, or when scenarios make you pass willpower tests on locations or parlay actions. In true solo then, you just have to accept some punishing situations. Part of having fun with Arkham is your tolerance for failure and frustration after all. If this could be a deal breaker, you can study potential scenarios and campaigns, but you may not want to when playing blind. When Monterey Jack is running in all cylinders, he's one of my favorite recent investigators to play. He has some fun proactive stats, he gets resources like Jenny, and I can't emphasize enough how good Bullwhip is. For fun factor, I rate him a fancy macaroni and cheese out of 10. This is the hardest section for me because I'm not some fantastic deck builder, nor do I play a lot of standalone or difficulty options other than normal. I also prefer to play scenarios and campaigns blindly when possible, so my lists are more generic as a result. I don't have a steadfast upgrade strategy, which might be a possible video in the future, preferring to just adjust to what I've learned about the campaign and Investigator, or frankly just grabbing the cards that look the most fun. In my old State of the Investigator videos, I point out a couple dozen cards that I recommend, and maybe I'll start with that. For standalone, I'll show some popular decks from Arkham DB. When recommending cards, I'll try to list alternatives if you don't own their set, so another warning if you're just listening to the video. Your biggest decision to make is his 5 level 0 Seeker cards. 2 standbys I use are Logical Reasoning and Dr. William T. Mailson. Both protect against the Encounter deck, Jack's biggest enemy. For the 5th card, I've been using a singleton copy of Dr. Milan Christopher. The skill boost and a few extra resources are nice. Obviously, he's a powerhouse if you don't play Taboo. You could consider Leo DeLuca, other allies with an intellect boost like Jeremiah Kirby from the Edge of the Earth Investigator set, or maybe Gregory Gry for that Keeper ally slot. If no Taboo, Mr. Rook is always an option, especially to grab the Bullwhip. The second decision to make is with his economy. By economy, I mean extra resources, extra card draw or search, and extra actions. Lone Wolf is a staple all rogues should consider, and with careful planning and a large map, can be just fine in larger teams. Pickpocketing is fairly reliable card draw, and Faustian Bargain is unethically powerful. Spend those resources, Backstab is great, the modal nature of Intel Report works wonders, and resource sinks like Streetwise, Level 0, and Higher Education are good to great choices. I especially like Intel Report and resource sinks because they are non-committal. You don't need to spend a massive amount of resources to justify their inclusion. I know resource skill sinks can be dubious for other investigators, but they're great with good resource generation. You could consider Well Connected, but it's ultimately not for me in this investigator. Let me know if you've tried it. As far as resource generation cards go, I don't like Dario in this situation. I'm not a fan of investments or any of the token bag gambling cards in any situation. Finally, other assets, events, and skill cards. Lockpicks level 0 or Flashlight works fine, maybe both in a 4-player game for consistency. After all, Lockpicks level 0 are prone to breaking, and Flashlights only have so many charges. Also, shout out to Pocket Telescope. It has some negative synergy with Monty's ability, but it's a fun situational tool. Perception, Manual Dexterity, Nimble, Unexpected Courage, and Quick Thinking are all great options for skill cards. Backstab is your primary fighting event. Scout Ahead and other free move cards combo off of Jack's ability and are just good cards overall. In the list I'm showing on screen, there are a couple of offbeat choices. I'm running so many events with double skill icons that I wanted to try Crystallizer. It's not a build-around card, but more of an additional bonus in a slot I wasn't using. I'm not worried about the bonded enemy either. Hit Me is intriguing, but I need to do my probability homework to evaluate it with accuracy. Either or both of those cards could be replaced with Heavy Furs from the Investigator set, or of course, You Handled This One. I've included more notes in the deck list, which will be in the description box. One strategy secrets have is Secrets, and this deck list by Start With a Name takes advantage. Arya Din's Twine, a card I didn't know existed, kinda thought all Innsmouth cards had a Cursed Blessed thing, takes Jack's extra resources and converts them into secrets. Payoff for this is Eon Chart level 4, which spends secrets for 2 extra actions, one of which can be used to move, which activates Monty's ability, and also, help you win the game. I hope you enjoyed this look at Not Indiana Jones and the new format to this series. I'm Bigstupidgrin. Until next time, have a good one.